Week one of the NFL season is in the books, and boy, what a week one it was. From Thursday night football all the way up through Vikings Bears last night, it was great to have NFL football back on our televisions. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they just happened to play in one of the best games of the opening week of the 2025 season. There's plenty of positives to take from that game. They won, first and foremost. I mean, it's hard to really go past that one, but we will. The offense put up 34 points, and it wasn't a cheap 34 points. They earned 34 points, which a couple years ago would have seemed almost unfathomable, considering where they were at with their quarterback, Kenny Pickett. Chris Boswell is still automatic, which is a good sign if you're a Steelers fan, because as with every season over the past decade, they're going to need to rely on Chris Boswell to win them football games, just like they did at MetLife Stadium on Sunday. Aaron Rodgers looked really good. Like, really good. Like old Aaron Rodgers. Not old man Aaron Rodgers, but vintage Aaron Rodgers, tossing 4 touchdowns and over 240 pass yards against his former team. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you got to give credit where credit is due. Jalen Ramsey was exactly what Jalen Ramsey said he was going to be. He was physical. He was a crap disturber, right? He's riling up the New York Jets. He's drawing personal foul penalties, and he's making big plays in big moments. That's exactly what you asked for when you brought Jalen Ramsey to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But as with every team after week one, whether they win or whether they lose, there are still some major issues that they need to have ironed out. And with the Steelers, they're the same issues that they've had over the past several seasons. It's the offensive line and it's the defensive line. The offensive line allowed 4 sacks. And while Aaron Rodgers was very, very good against the Jets, I'm not sure how long the 41-year-old is going to be able to be very, very good if he keeps getting hit, checks notes, 7 times each football game. A lot of that is due to Broderick Jones making his re-debut on the left side of the offensive line. That was a rough performance. That was a rough way to try to reestablish yourself on that side of the football. But that's what Broderick Jones has been. It's year 3. It's make or break for Broderick Jones. And I understand there needs to be a little bit of leeway given, because for the past 2 years, he's been learning the right side. He's been playing the right side. He's been building experience on the right side. And now all of a sudden, he's on the left. But let's not forget, this was supposed to be his position. This is why they traded up to take Broderick Jones, and he has to be better. So you might be able to get one mulligan. I know there's a lot of people in the fan base that aren't willing to give him even that, but he needs to be able to show marked improvement between that game against the Jets and this upcoming Sunday against the Seattle Seahawks. But it wasn't just him. It was the entire offensive line that it didn't mesh as a unit. There was very little push in the run game. I understand people are a little down on the running backs this year. Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell. There's a lot to be proven in that offensive backfield. But they got to get holes first. They have to have places and lanes to run to, and they just didn't have that on Sunday afternoon. Now, on the flip side of things, the defensive line. They allowed 182 rush yards to the New York Jets. And I understand there is a little bit of a different factor when you're going up against Justin Fields. I think Steelers fans are uniquely qualified to understand how difficult it can be when you have a quarterback with the talent and the athleticism of Justin Fields back there. But at the same time, that's not allowed to be an excuse for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why? Last I checked, they're still in a division with Lamar Jackson. So if they want to win anything, they have to be able to handle quarterbacks with that skill set. They weren't able to do it. And it wasn't really even Justin Fields. It was just a young New York Jets offensive line that was pushing them around. The Jets did a good job to basically avoid going to TJ Watt's side. That's something that I think we're going to need to see addressed this season as well. TJ Watt needs to start moving around. So this can't be as plain and simple as the Jets made it seem. Well, we're going to run left because TJ's on the right. He still blew up a couple plays because he is TJ Watt. But for the most part, they ran directly to Alex Highsmith. They ran directly to Cam Heyward. They ran directly towards Keanu Benton, and there was very little pushback. And that's against a very young, inexperienced offensive line. So both sets of big guys struggled on Sunday, which is a little concerning because since Andy Weidel and Omar Khan took over, that has been the focus. You look at the last 3 NFL drafts, it has been defensive line this year, which we still haven't seen anything from Derek Harmon. When he comes back, I'd imagine that provides a boost to this defensive line. But before that, it's Troy Fautanu, who was okay on Sunday, and Broderick Jones, who, of course, we already talked about. The lines have been the focus in the offseason. The lines have been the way that the Steelers front office has told us they're going to reclaim glory by building up front. Well, up front failed. Plain and simple. That's what happened on Sunday. The big guys didn't show up in the way that you needed them to show up. Now, the good thing is you still walked away from MetLife Stadium with a win. But those are 2 major concerns that the Steelers need to address going forward. Now, the question becomes, which one is more concerning? I've heard this conversation a lot over the past 24 hours. And I'd have to say, the defensive line is the winner of that conversation, and it's not even close. This is the same unit with a couple of new faces, but for the most part, the same unit that got caved in 5 straight times to end last year. And 5 straight times, the Steelers did not walk out of the stadium with a victory. Not only that, they played, and I hate to put it in these terms, but they technically did play the lesser of the 2 lines for the New York Jets. That offensive line for the New York Jets, young, inexperienced, and yet they were still able to push around guys like Cam Heyward. They were still able to push around the middle linebackers for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson. They were still able to push around Keanu Benton. They were able to push around Y.A. Black in his NFL debut. You look at the defensive side of things for the Jets, they got a couple pretty good guys on that side of the football. So it makes a little bit more sense that the Steelers offensive line would struggle with that defensive line that it is that the Steelers defensive line would struggle with the Jets offense. So I think the defensive line, in my opinion, is more concerning. You look at the offensive line, and yes, there are concerns. We already mentioned Broderick Jones, and he is the biggest concern for the Steelers. He just point blank needs to be better. He needs to get better very quickly if the Steelers want to be able to stack and build off of their performances. But I think all in all, offensive lines are just something you have to be patient with. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it takes time for offensive lines to mesh, whether it's experienced or whether it's young like the Pittsburgh Steelers are dealing with. Troy Fautanu needs some time to become a polished product. He only started his, second game? He's played in 3 games now total, and they haven't even been full. So you're going to need some time for him to find his footing. You have a second-year interior that needs to be able to build and stack in Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, who both played fairly decent on Sunday, but they still need to be able to mesh with the other 3 guys that you have out on the field there. So I think all in all, you look at that offensive line and you can compare it, probably not apples to apples, but you can compare it to the 2024 Baltimore Ravens offensive line. That first game of the year last year, the Ravens looked awful. The Chiefs got after Lamar Jackson like it was nobody's business. But by the end of the season, they were one of the best units in the entire NFL. I'm not saying that's exactly what you're going to see in Pittsburgh, but it's just an example of how it takes offensive lines time to be able to mesh. I think that what we saw in week 1 is going to be figured out a lot more by the time we get to week 7, week 8. The only thing you have to hope is that Aaron Rodgers can stay upright enough to make it to where that offensive line is a little bit better. But if you look at the defensive line, yeah, you can hope that Y.A. Black rises to the challenge in his rookie year. You can hope that Derek Harmon comes back from that MCL sprain and looks exactly like the first rounder you hoped he would be. And there's a good chance both of those things happen. But at the end of the day, for that defensive line to be able to perform at the level that we want them to, it has to be the guys that are already here. It has to be the guys that were here last year. They need to perform better. Cam Heyward needs to get better. He cannot get pushed around like he did against the Jets. Keanu Benton, a guy that I think a lot of us believe is maybe miscast as a nose tackle, but nonetheless, that's where he's at. So the Steelers need him to step up and be year one Keanu Benton, not year 2 plus week 1 of Keanu Benton that we've seen of late. Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson, I already mentioned it. They need to be so much better. So at the end, to me, what's more concerning is the defensive line, because the offensive line, I think, just needs some time to mesh, and they need Broderick Jones to mature. That's one player. The defensive side of the football, they need 2 rookies to figure it out quickly, and they need a bunch of veterans to kind of reverse the entire discussion that we've been having about them over the past 6 games now that they've played at this level. We'll have to see, and it's going to have to be a quick turnaround because the test doesn't get any easier. I understand if you look at the box score, it wasn't all that impressive from the Seattle Seahawks, but that is a very talented offense that is coming to play to Pittsburgh in the home opener next week, and that is an offense that really only allowed 1 sack last week on Sam Darnold, somebody who is not as mobile as Justin Fields, and yet he stayed as upright as Justin Fields did in week 1. So you have to continue to improve, and you have to hope that these 2 concerns, especially the defensive line, start to figure itself out. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. We'll see you next week.